Hello, everyone, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the spoiler. I repeat, spoiler review of Superman, the brand new film from writer director James Gunn, starring David Corenswet as the Man of Steel himself. And this is the first film in the DC universe. I absolutely adore this film. I've seen it twice. I had to watch it again in order to kind of grasp, everything that I saw in the first viewing. And I gave my initial review. If you want to hear that review, the non-spoiler review, you can find it on my channel. But I couldn't get into a lot of things on that review because it would be spoilery. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who haven't seen it. So I decided to split them up in two and do a non-spoiler and a spoiler. This is more of a talk than it is a review because I reviewed it already. I gave it a B plus. It is a excellent film to kick off this new cinematic universe over at DC. And so I wanted to touch in on some points here concerning the film that I enjoyed and some things that I didn't. And especially since I've viewed it a couple of times now, I have a greater sense of the story, and there's a couple of things that I even missed on the first viewing, shockingly enough. Nothing big or major, but just little nuggets that kind of explain some things clearer for me. It wasn't earth shattering or caused me not to like the movie on the first viewing, but it just added to my enjoyment of the film. This film kicks off, we don't get an origin story in this movie. This is Superman already Superman. Clark he's been through Smallville. We didn't have to see Krypton blow up. We didn't have to see Paul and Ma Kent raise him up and all this other good stuff, and him discovering his powers. We've been through that. We saw it in the Christopher Reeves version. We saw it in The Man of Steel. We've seen it in comics. We've seen it on television. Hey, we saw a whole television show dedicated to the upbringing of Clark Kent. So we didn't need to dive back into the origin story. If you don't know the origin story of Superman by this point, God bless you. And now, the one thing I will say, I say all that as somebody who is in his mid 40s, have watched multiple versions of Superman. I would go as far to say every version on television, comics, and movies. But in regards to little kids or children who are going to see this movie with their parents or friends or whoever, and this is their first Superman. This is the first time they're experiencing Superman on the big screen. In some cases, at all in any media. And they probably don't know the origin. They probably don't know the full story of Superman. I think in regards to those people, not just kids, because there are grown-ups who probably don't know, to be honest with you. But in regards to those people, they'll probably be a little thrown off by it. And that's one knock that I didn't give in my initial review. Just in regards to those individuals who are experiencing the character of Superman for the first time and just want to see a superhero film, whether they're young or old, there'll be a little concerning there. They're like, okay, so how did he become Superman? Did he get hit by a meteor or something like that? They don't know that he's an alien and all this here. Now, all of this is explained throughout the film, if you sit there and pay attention. But I'm just saying, as far as somebody for the first time sitting down in the theater and don't know the story of Superman and hope to be introduced to this character from the beginning, you're not going to get that in this type of film. And For me, I appreciated it. For me personally, I loved that decision. It's something like Batman. If they make a Batman movie, which is coming, not anytime soon, it'll probably be a couple of years from now, as far as in this cinematic universe, uh James Gunn has said that there won't be an origin story. We're not going to see Martha and Thomas Wayne get shot in the alley in that film. Thank God, because we've seen it in every single iteration of that character, But I understand for younger viewers who don't know, who's not in the comics, uh, probably didn't watch the animated series and so on and so forth, don't know. But hopefully, with good storytelling in the film, you can find out. And that's one thing about this movie that it does do well. It does tell that story that Kal-El, which is his given name, his biological name, comes from Krypton. He's sent here by his parents um, uh, to avoid the destruction of Krypton and whatnot. He lands in Smallville, Kansas, raised up by the Kents, and voila, there we go. So it is told to us and shown to us in a degree throughout the film. We just have to commit to it. But as a comic book lover, as a fan of these comic book films and properties, I was all in on it. I'm glad we picked up uh, at the time that we did pick up in this film. This film starts with the explanation that metahumans have been on Earth for 3 centuries at this point, 300 years on Earth. So we've had superhuman beings in this version of Earth already, so it didn't make sense to have an origin story when we we have a world established that has metahumans for the past 300 years. And the first image we see is Superman crash landing on the snow, that we saw in the trailer and everything. And he's beaten up, he's broken up, and the text on screen explains that this is Superman's first defeat. This is the first time he's lost. And did he lose? I mean, broken ribs and punctured lungs and all this other stuff. I mean, the hammer of Bavaria, it tore his behind up, who we later find out, once again, it's spoilers. We later find out that is Ultraman in that suit, and he beat him half to death, literally. And once again, I think this was a genius way to start this film, because if we find our hero at his lowest, this is where we start at his lowest. It, we get to go on this journey with him, as he accomplished his goal, as he vanished the enemy and come out on top. We can go on that journey through this story, and that excited me for some strange reason. I was intrigued by that when that was the opening scene, because when you see it in the trailer, of course, and this is in all movies, in all movie trailers, when you see the trailer, you're not seeing the movie in context. It's not like it's a shorter version of the film as far as chronological order. Everything is all out of whack. And so I didn't think that was going to be the opening shot. And to be honest with you, when you really go back and watch the trailers, all of them, I think it's 3 trailers that they released, a couple of clips, but the 3 trailers that they released were basically the same thing. They were the same scenes from the movie, and all of those trailers were the beginning part of the film. I think the last trailer showed a little bit of the third act, but it didn't show everything. But the majority of those trailers were the first act of the movie. And so, once again, this was the opening scene, and I'm like, okay, so we can only go up from here. No pun intended. We're only going up from here. So, crypto, another factor in this film, I mentioned in my initial review, I was a little nervous about going into this movie. I thought we were going to be oversaturated with this dog. And I love dogs. You know, my daughter has a dog, which basically means I'm an owner of a dog by default because it's in my house. But I love dogs, you know, I do. And this is coming from somebody when I was younger, I was allergic to dogs. I couldn't be around dogs. And it's weird how that just went away. It went away because this isn't our first dog. We've had a couple of dogs before our current uh, little crypto that runs around and destroys the house. But that's neither here nor there. I thought we was going to be over sad. I thought this was going to be a crypto movie. The way they were promoting him, you know, every promotional material was crypto. Oh man, I don't want to see that. Not that I don't care for the dog. I want to see a Superman movie, not a crypto movie. But the film gave you just the right amount of crypto, and you actually fall in love with the dog. At least I did. I fell in love with crypto. No matter how unruly he was, he was still a beautiful dog. Loved that dog and added to every scene that he was a part of. We get to the Fortress of Solitude. We meet the Superman robots, which is from the, I think, All Star Superman comics. And, or was it that? I think it was the animated movie. I think it was one of, but they did incorporate it in the comics after. But I think they were introduced in the animated movie first. Either way, don't care. I love them in this film. I love that addition to heal Superman with the rays from the sun, magnifying it so he can get soaked in the sun's power to heal him. Superman, he gets off the table, he goes back, immediately goes back into the fight against the Hammer of Bavaria. I'm pretty sure I'm saying the name wrong, but anyways, goes back into the fight and loses again. He loses again, and I thought that was cool. I'm like, man, this is cool to see Superman struggle because you always look at Superman as the the automatic problem solver. You know, as long as you don't have kryptonite, he can destroy anything. I mean, it's nothing that can stop him. Kryptonite or magic, it's nothing that can stop him. But they found a way to work it into the comic lore that he can be beat, he can be hurt, and still be the Superman that we know and love. So we get introduced to Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, and I'm just gonna say it right now. After watching it a second time, Nicholas Hoult is the best Lex Luthor ever. I loved his portrayal of that villain. He embodied everything that I remember from the comics. I think that's the most important thing for me. Going back to 1978 Superman, where we got the late great Gene Hackman playing that character. I love Gene Hackman. I love his Lex Luthor, but that wasn't the Lex Luthor in the comics. Now, a lot of people's first exposure to that character was through the movies, namely me. You know, before I was old enough to get into comics and actually read, and explore what that character was truly all about throughout the comic lore. Um, he is not this comedic criminal that, petty thug or whatever that was displayed in those films. But that Lex Luthor fit the tone of that movie, fit the story that they were telling, Richard Donner was telling in that film. And so I'm not mad at it, So this is no disrespect to him. He fit that film. Kevin Spacey in Superman Returns fit that film, which was pretty much a continuation of the Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. But I think Kevin Spacey was the closest thing up to this point, the closest thing to the Lex Luthor that I remember from the comics. And I'm just talking film because Michael Rosenbaum on Smallville has been my favorite Lex Luthor uh, ever. and he's still up there with me. But it's something about Nicholas Holt's performance in this film that made him one of the best comic book villains in all of comic book films. And I'm including Marvel in past DC films. He managed to blend, and I'm talking a perfect blend here, blend a level of menace, of entitlement, of uh even compassion. You know, there's a genius, all of this wrapped up in one, and make that character so layered, which he could have been this mustache twirling villain, which, you know, you strip down the layers. That's basically what Lex Luthor is, but he gave that character so much, you know, and I don't know if it's how the character was written or how it was acted by Nicholas Hoult or a combination of both. But it absolutely worked in this movie. Loved this Lex Luthor, the perfect Lex Luthor for this Superman, for this cinematic universe that we're going forward with. And so we get that introduction. We get introduced to Miss Tessmacher, who plays a bigger role later on, and everything up to this point, it was coming together. I'm not going to sit here and say that the first 30 minutes of this movie was perfect, because it wasn't. Because up to this point, I'm kind of confused. I'm like, is this a non-linear story, or are we going to be going in flashbacks and this, that, and the third? I'm like, where are we going with this? I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm just not understanding where the story is going at this point. And I was hoping to get that, because I know the movie's only 2 hours long and we're 30 minutes in. So I wanted to kind of get a sense of what's going on up to this point. But that was immediately thrown away. Even though I still didn't know and had questions, I was enjoying the next two scenes so much I forgot. You know, and that was the two scenes that we got basically our only exposure to Clark Kent. You know, Clark Kent in the Daily Planet, and the scene with Clark and Lois in the apartment for the interview scene. The scene in the Daily Planet, which on my first viewing, I was kind of, uh, I think in my review I mentioned that I didn't too much care for David Corenswet's Clark Kent performance, and I know why I said that. But after I watched it the second time, I I appreciated it a little more. I saw little nuances that he was doing that I didn't pick up on in the first viewing, and I appreciated it more. I still stand by the fact his voice didn't really change, and like I said before, I'm not expecting him to do the whole Christian Bale Batman switch up with his voice. I'm just me, you know. He just the way his voice comes out, and I guess it's just David Cornsweet's voice. He he has this confident, strong voice, and it's the same voice he uses for Superman. You know, that same tone, and you know, I'm like, well, you know, it's not hard to pick up on the fact that it's the same person. That's my whole thing. Now I get the hypno glasses that we do find out, and this is in the comics. This is comic accurate, that he wears hypno glasses to, uh, throw off his appearance to everybody that looks at him, and so they won't look at him and say, you know what, you resemble Superman, but the glasses throw you off. So it was just a voice thing, and I think in my mind, and I constantly tell myself that I don't want to compare David Cornsweet to Henry Cavill. Don't want to compare him to Christopher Reeves or Tom Welling or whoever, Brandon Rolfe. I don't want to do that. This is his version. And I found myself realizing that when I made that statement in my review, I was comparing him. I was comparing him to Christopher Reeves. Christopher Reeves did the best transition of those characters. I say those, it's the same character. Clark Kent and Superman. Just the way he slumped his shoulders when he was Clark, the way he lumbered around and clumsy, and just he didn't change his voice to the degree of squeaky, but it was just a little subtle thing that he did. And when he was Superman, he would broaden his shoulders and stick his chest out and chin up, and his voice was more confident and strong. And it was just those little things that made Christopher Reeve one of the best Supermen, if not the best Superman, according to my mom, the best Superman to ever put on the suit. And I was unfairly putting that on David Corenswet. Now, I do appreciate what the little things that he was doing in that scene. Now, when we get to the scene with him and Lois, it's I think they're calling it the interview scene. That's different because he was him. He was just him. He wasn't Clark. He was Kal-El. He was Superman. He was just him. This was my favorite scene in the movie. Yes, the punchy smash with the kaiju and Ultraman and the engineer and all that was fun and good. But this was my favorite scene in the film. Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane was probably the best casting throughout this entire film. The entire cast was banger. This was great casting by James Gunn throughout this entire film. The dude's a genius. You can say what you want about James Gunn. He's a genius. He knows what he wants. He has a vision and he executes it. Everybody a part of this film was perfectly cast, but nothing can be as perfect as Rachel Brosnahan as Lois. She's the best Lois Lane, hands down, hands down. And I know there's a lot of Margot Kidder fans out there who is screaming blasphemy at me not right now, but come on. I'm sorry. I love Margot Kidder, but come on. Rachel Brosnahan was born to play Lois Lane. Just watch one episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Mabel. I said it back then, and this is before any consideration for a Superman movie at the time. I said, man, she would make a perfect Lois Lane. I always felt that watching that show. And when this came around and they announced that they cast her, I was like, well, that's a duh. That's a no-brainer. And she knocked it out the park. But what made it so great, what made her performance so great, was the chemistry between her and David Corenswet. And it showed so much in this scene. If I had one knock about Lois Lane in this movie, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Rachel Brosnahan, is the fact that she kind of disappears in the third act. She doesn't have much to do in the third act because we get this powerful scene in the first act. We get another great scene, well, a couple of great scenes in the second act, her interacting with the Justice Gang and her with Mr. Terrific as they go to that pocket dimension. That she is great, and she kind of get lost in the shuffle in the third act. But that's my only knock, and that's not her fault. But she was excellent, man. Excellent. And this scene was so good. How they switched it up. It went from lovey-dovey to playful banter to actual heated discussion to the point that they basically almost broke up, if not completely broke up. I know they were on the fence there when Clark left the apartment. And it just escalated to that point. And this was like I don't know, how long was this scene? It felt like it took up half the movie, but I'm not mad at it taking up half the movie. It was so good. You couldn't cut nothing from that scene. That was just cinema there. You letting actors just act, letting them do their thing, just letting them eat. And it almost stole the movie. I would have sat there for 2 hours and watched Lois and Clark just go back and forth at the dinner table and have been happy. I would have felt I got my money's worth. That's how good that scene was. But in the midst of that scene, we learn a lot of story. We find out that Superman is kind of a lone wolf. He marched to the beat of his own drum. He doesn't take orders from the president. He doesn't take orders from the Justice Gang. He doesn't take orders from the some conglomerate or anything like that. He marches to the beat of his own drum. He goes where he's needed, where he feels help is needed to save lives no matter what. And he intervenes in this invasion that we later find out that Lex Luthor is orchestrating uh, just to have the world turn on Superman. And so he goes to stop this war and inadvertently gets involved in this geopolitical battle, I guess you could say. And it sparks up a whole nother thing, which brings me to a point that I wanted to talk about before, but I couldn't. And it's I don't know, it's the real world implications here. This movie mirrors exactly what's happening in the world right now. You can go to the theater, watch Superman, go home, turn on CNN, and it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. It just with different names for the countries and different names for Lex Luthor. Replace Lex Luthor with Elon Musk, and you get the movie. It's pretty much the same thing, and so it's definitely timely and poignant, if you will. And so Lex Luthor and his minions, the engineer and Ultraman, they invade the Fortress of Solitude. And once again, sitting there in the theater the first time, when I watched it the first time, I'm like, how did he just walk up to the Fortress of Solitude? And they explained it away, but when I watched it the first time, I was like, boy, they're gonna have to explain this. But we find out that Ultraman is the clone of Superman. So they used his DNA, and that's how they got in. But anyway, they invade the Fortress of Solitude. We see the engineer just go to town on the Superman robots, which was cool little fight. Gets in a fight with Crypto. We get to see some Crypto action there. And then we get our big little turning point at this juncture of the movie when Superman, the first scene of the movie, when Superman was brought back to the fortress and the Superman robots turned on the message from Krypton of his parents, his biological parents, who was played by Bradley Cooper as Jor-El, and the mother. I don't know. I've seen that actress in something, but I can't recall what I seen her in. But that's neither here nor there. They play his parents, and they're they sent a message, and the message got damaged when he came to Earth or crashed on Earth or whatever. So you only get the first half of the message, and the first half of the message is uplifting. It's inspiring. We sent you to Earth to help and to be a beacon of light or whatever the case may be. And when the engineer hacks into the computer there at the Fortress of Solitude, she is able to decrypt the second half of the message, where we find out that Jor-El and his mother sent them to Earth to conquer Earth. And so this is all the gas that Lex needed to start this fire. This pretty much confirms his feelings about Superman, that he's an alien. He's here to rule over us or whatever the case may be. So this was confirmation in his eyes. And so he releases the message all the while he's invading the Fortress of Solitude. He has a little distraction going on. He unleashes this kaiju on Metropolis, and this is when we get the fight we see in the trailer, and he's fighting the kaiju, and uh, this is where, at this moment, when I fell in love with David Corenswet's version of Superman. Something that we didn't get to see in other versions of this character on the big screen. While he was fighting this giant monster, he would stop and save people. He would save a dog from being crushed by the foot of this monster. He saved a woman from being crushed, and saved these people that was in the building. Every time he saved them, he would smile at them. He'll ask them if they was okay. He'll give them little affirmations, I guess. Just breathe. Just take deep breaths and whatever, and stuff like that, and give a smile. And that's the Superman that I loved from the comics. This is the Superman that I always envisioned, in live action. And I finally got to see it. Love Henry Cavill. Love him. But that was such a dark and moody guy to say he was Superman. But for that film, he fit that vision of Zack Snyder. Now, for comic fans and lovers of the animated show, this is the Superman for you. This is exactly what I wanted to see. And at that point in the film, I knew that nothing else could bother me throughout this movie, and nothing did. Yeah, I had some little nitpicks from that moment on, but nothing to deter me from feeling that this was a great Superman movie. And so he defeats the kaiju with the help of the Justice Gang. This is when we get introduced to Guy Gardner's Green Lantern, played by Nathan Fillion. Mr. Terrific, played by Edi. Now, I can't pronounce his last. I had it. I practiced it before I started the show, and I still can't get it out. But I do enjoy him as an actor. He stole the movie, to be honest. Every scene that he was in, he stole the movie. I loved Mr. Terrific in this movie. And we got Hawk Girl, played by Isabela Merced. This was an interesting decision by James Gunn to include these characters in this story. The easiest thing to do, the low-hanging fruit, of course, you're gonna bring in Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. They'll bring in Wonder Woman, bring in Batman. The most notable of superheroes in the DC lore. But he decided to pick these obscure characters, and that's what James Gunn do. If you really go through the history of his films, who knew anything about the Guardians of the Galaxy before the movies came out? I didn't. I read comics. I did not know anything about Guardians. When he did the Suicide Squad, I knew a couple of those characters. I didn't know all of them. Peacemaker, I knew nothing about, and that ended up being the best character in the film. I mean, it got his own TV show and has a cameo in this movie, and I love Peacemaker. And so he has a way of finding the most obscure characters and turning them into something. And so this was a interesting choice to pick these particular characters to pop up in this film. I said in my initial review that I was worried about that, leading up to the film with the trailers and everything, that, okay, we're going to be oversaturated with all of these DC characters, and this is supposed to be a superhero film or a Superman film. I don't want to see all of these characters, man. If you're going to do that, just make a Justice League movie. But instead, we got the right amount of these characters, because he's building a universe here. And so You can't just have a movie with just Superman and nothing else happens. You have to incorporate these characters in some way and expand the universe out that way. And I thought that was genius. And using these particular characters was smart. And they did not oversaturate the movie. They were used properly. They came in to do their jobs and they did it perfectly. The only one who got shortchanged in this film is Hulk Girl, is Isabela Merced. Guy Garner had a great part. Mr. Terrific had a terrific part. Not so much with Hulk Girl. She was just there, and that's the only part about that whole Justice Gang that I just can't get over. Even after the second viewing, it was worse. That's the only part about this movie that got worse on the second viewing, and that was Hulk Girl. Because I can't help but wonder, was her part cut or what? I mean, what happened here? Because we got nothing. And if you followed Hulk Girl in the comics, you would know that that is a very interesting character. And I'm not saying we had to do a whole backstory and origin story and tell her arc in this movie, but you could have hinted to something about her character. We didn't get that in this film. But it is what it is. Hopefully moving forward, we'll get more, you know. And so around this time, they defeated the kaiju, and voila, next thing you know, Lex Luthor released the footage of the message from his parents. And now everybody turns on him. Now, this was another part, and him, I mean Superman. This was another part of the movie where I was like, I get what you're doing. I'm a roll with what you're doing, but I wish it was done a little better. And what I mean by that is the people instantly turned on Superman. I mean, instant. I understand they saw the message. I understand that that initially the plans were from his parents for him to come to Earth and take over Earth. But nothing from Superman throughout the, I think, 3 years he's been Superman. At least that's the way they set it up in this film. Nothing indicates that he's anything like that. He's a hero. He literally just risked his life to save everybody. And they instantly turned. I'm not saying the people shouldn't have turned. Yeah, but it should have been kind of a rollout to it. As opposed to immediately shouting and cursing him out and throwing cans at his head and all this other stuff. It was like too fast for me. It didn't, that just didn't work. But I get the context of the story. I just wish it was kind of played out a little better. But that's just me, you know. So now we get Superman. He decides to turn himself in to the Justice Department because he's a Boy Scout. He's not going to go on a run. And so he turns himself in, and Rick Flag, who I love Rick Flag in Creature Commandos. I love Frank Grillo, who plays Rick Flag Sr. I didn't see the purpose of him being in this movie. He was in for 2 scenes, and this was one of them. And he said maybe 2 words, but it was nothing. He was just there. And I know he's gonna have a bigger role in the Peacemaker season 2 series. But I don't know. It was just weird that he was just there to be there. He was there. He was more useless than Hulk Girl, and that's saying something. But anyways, he gets turned into Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor puts him in that pocket dimension, and this is where we meet Metamorpho, and he crafts kryptonite to weaken Superman, and this is where we get to see Lex Luthor be as diabolical that I've ever seen in any iteration of this character, where he literally blows a man's head off in front of Superman, a guy that helps him, a guy that is a fan of Superman, and playing Russian roulette with him, and just kills him. And like, okay, well, we'll find somebody else. We go get somebody else to find out, because he's interrogating him to find out who raised him, who uh, found him as a baby, And of course, Superman won't tell, and so he killed the guy. And I'm like, man, Lex is a beast in this movie, man. And Nicholas Hoult, I tell you, bro, I cannot scream any louder my praise for this man as this character. Just to think that initially he went there when he was auditioning for this movie, he was auditioning to be Superman, Nicholas Hoult. And I wasn't mad at that idea because I like Nicholas Hoult from playing in the X-Men films and numerous other projects that he was in. I really do enjoy him, even though I see him more as a Batman, but I would have took him as Superman. Oh, but no, once again, James Gunn, genius move, saw something else. He saw something else there. And when they cast him as Lex Luthor, I was a little skeptical. Like, can he pull it off? And then I thought about, well, Jesse Eisenberg, God bless him. As long as he isn't that, I'll be all right with it. Well, he blew that completely out of the water. But upon witnessing that brutal killing, Metamorpho, he finds a new, I don't know, heart. He gets the heart. He decides that now he wants Superman to get out and help him save his baby, little baby Joey. Once again, from the comics, didn't ever think I'll see that in film, but we got to see it. And he creates a version of the sun to power up Superman. They escape. There's an epic little battle there where Superman is holding the baby about trying to fight off those rafters, and you got a proton river that's about to suck him into a black hole, and all this is going on. All the while, you got Mr. Terrific and Lois. They found their way into the pocket dimension, and Crypto is there as well. And it sounds messy on the surface, but it actually flowed pretty well. I thought this was a really good scene, a exciting scene. We get out of the pocket dimension, and Lois Lane brings Superman to home, brings him to Smallville to be with his parents so he can recuperate from all the radiation that he got from that kryptonite. And another great scene between David Corenswet and oh my God, what's his name? Pewitt Taylor, who plays Jonathan Kent. What a scene, man. And once again, I'm sitting in the theater, and my daughter, I guess my daughter knew, she sensed it on me, knowing the relationship between me and my father, and how deep that conversation was between Clark and Jonathan Kent. And it was, yeah, it was Niagara Falls. I was in there crying. I was crying because I felt it, because those conversations or similar conversations took place between me and my dad. And I remember when I watched it, I can just picture my dad telling me everything that Jonathan Kent was telling Clark in that moment. And it just, I did good. I did good. It wasn't complete. My makeup didn't run, but it was there. It had a couple of tears that dropped out, but it was a powerful scene, really good scene, and it really reinforced the fact that because Clark, that he was so worried about why his biological parents sent him to Earth, and that reassured him that, that conversation with Jonathan reassured him that his real parents were Jonathan and Martha Kent. Those Joel and why am I blanking on her name? But the mother name. But they, yeah, they are his biological parents. But that's not what reared him up. That's not why he is who he is. Jonathan and Martha Kent is the reason Superman is who he is. And I thought they did a excellent job by depicting that in one small scene. We didn't need an origin. We didn't need to see Jonathan Kent raising him up and teaching him right from wrong. And, we didn't have to have a scene where they sit him on a couch and try to reinforce, oh no, you fight for good, truth, justice, and American way. It was none of that. It was just a small, subtle scene, and it told you everything that you needed to know, and it it worked so well. And I was just amazed by how less was more in this instance. But anyways, meanwhile, Lex Luthor, he's mad now. Superman got free, so he, ramps up the power on that pocket dimension portal thing, and it exploded to the point where it caused a rift. So now Metropolis is about to get swallowed up in this rift, and this was cool. I like this scene. To see the destruction of Metropolis. Now, this was destruction done right, as opposed to Man of Steel, where Metropolis just turned into a scorched earth wasteland during the battle. This made sense. This felt comic booky. This felt animated series. The way the city was just being torn apart by this rift. And all the while, you have Superman going around. He's catching buildings from falling on this woman in a car. He gets in a fight with the engineer and Ultraman in this stadium, which was cool. All the while, you have an invasion that's about to take place in those two between those two fictional countries. And this was another scene that almost had me crying. And it wasn't a scene. It was more or less just one little part. And that's when the little kid was holding up the flag and calling out to Superman. And I don't know why that moved me. It just moved me. I was like, come on. But Superman's tied up with this battle. And you're like, oh my God, is he going to get there on time? Because those people are about to get annihilated by his army. And so he's in this battle, and of course he's struggling, because he's going up against two superhuman beings, two metahumans. And one of them is his clone, who we get that reveal in a couple of minutes. But they're going at it in the stadium to the point where they figured out that, okay, I'm going to use the engineer, who is made up of all nanobots. I'm going to take the nanobots and smother you and fill up your lungs and kill you. And that's one way to kill Superman. I mean, he's super, but I don't think he's super enough to whereas he can live without breathing. And so he comes up with the plan. He's going to fly out into the atmosphere with both of them attached to him and just come back down with the force of a meteor. And that's how he gets loose from it and able to throw up those nanobots. And this incapacitates the engineer, who we don't see anymore in the movie. And that kind of bothered me too. I was like, well, how you knock out somebody that's made of nanobots? I mean, that was weird to me. But whatever. I looked past that because we didn't have time to breathe, because Superman was going up against Ultraman, whose suit was all torn up from the impact of them falling back to Earth. He takes off the suit, and it is none other than a clone of Superman. It was David Corenswet with a wig on. And if you read comics, you pretty much know who Ultraman is, and that's basically what he is. And so it didn't come as a shock, but it still was a shock to me. I don't know why it surprised me in the movie, and I know who Ultraman is, but it still surprised me in the film. And you have Lex Luthor controlling him, because Lex Luthor, once again, showing his genius, and this was planted throughout the film when he fought the Hammer of Bavaria with Ultraman in that suit, that Lex was controlling him. Because Lex had figured out all of Superman's fighting styles or how he fought. So he came up and devised this plan on how to defeat him, with this fighting style, had these team of tech wizards that can orchestrate this fight. And that's how Superman struggled so much, because Lex Luthor figured out how to beat him. And he knows his moves, his every move. He studied him. So they go at it back and forth. Of course, Ultraman is having the upper hand. Lex Luthor makes the comment that you can't beat brains. Brawn cannot beat brains, and Superman smiles and he's like, "Yeah, I have the brains too. I have brains too," or something to that effect. And he whistles, and who comes to the rescue? It is none other than Crypto. Another element, I think right before that, we find out that yes, Clark is not going to be able to get to Bavaria to save those people from that army. He called the Justice Gang to go help. And that's so similar to what we witnessed in the animated series. And I was so shocked and surprised by that. Again, I'm like, okay, this works. This works perfectly. And so he whistles for Crypto. Crypto comes and gets Ultraman off of him, and they both team up because at this point, Lex doesn't have a plan for Crypto. So they were able to get the upper hand, to the point where Superman throws Ultraman into the black hole. And I don't know if this is gonna set up Bizarro or what, but that could be a nice way to set up Bizarro later on down the line. But if we never revisit it again, that's fine too. That doesn't have to be revisited. So the Rafters come, the other squad, this little legion of warriors that Lex have, and Superman and Crypto just go to work on them. He goes to work on them. Now he's going after Lex. Gives Lex a nice speech, as Crypto works him. It reminded me of when the Hulk took Loki, the puny god scene in the Avengers. It was the same thing. Crypto worked Lex Luthor. I'm like, man, is he gonna kill him? I was getting kind of worried for the Lex. I ain't gonna lie, but he probably wish he was dead after he was after that beating. But that was cool, and they end up throwing Lex Luthor into Belle Reeves, and we get the obligatory Superman Lois kiss at the end of the battle and whatnot. And Superman, he's back at the Fortress of Solitude, getting healed up from all of this battling he'd been doing. And who drops by but his cousin, Kara. Kara Zor-El. Yes, played by Millie Adcock. If you're a fan of House of the Dragon, yes, her. And she's playing Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, in Supergirl that comes out next year. But she makes a cameo in this movie to pick up Crypto, who we find out is actually her dog. All this time, Superman was just dog sitting for Supergirl. But that was a nice little scene to see her in. The one thing I didn't like about it was the explanation. I did not like that Superman told the Superman robots, oh, she goes to a planet that has a red sun so she can get drunk because our metabolism here, we can't get drunk and blah blah blah. That's all fine and good, and that's true, but why are you telling this to the Superman robots? Shouldn't they know that already? I'm like, okay, why are you? If they already know, who are you explaining it to? Us? We don't need to know that. We'll find that out next year when Supergirl comes out. I didn't need the explanation. And I already knew why she was drunk, but it's still kind of baffling. Why is she still drunk? Because she is currently under a yellow sun. That would have wore off. I'm just saying. But anyways, that was the end of the film. But well, I will say the last scene was also epic in my humble opinion, because when Superman in the first scene he returned to the Fortress of Solitude, the Superman robots turned on the message from his biological parents to soothe him. So this time when he's healing up in the Fortress of Solitude, the Superman robots turns on his parents' video to soothe him. And this time it was Jonathan and Martha Kent. And what was so genius about this, and I didn't pick it up until the second viewing. That's why I said it was just little things that I didn't catch the first time that I caught today when I watched it again. It was the fact that when that first scene, when we see his biological parents, that's the scene when he was healing up and the sun rays are healing him, and that message was supposed to soothe him, yet when the rays hit him, he was screaming. He was in pain because his bones were getting back in place. He was healing up rapidly, so he was screaming in pain listening to their voices. At the end of this movie, while he's healing up and watching the footage of Jonathan and Martha Kent when he was younger, and his Jonathan Kent lifting him up in the air and he's posing like Superman as a little kid and stuff like that, he's smiling and the movie goes off. Once again, another tear rolled down my eye. This time I was by myself, so I didn't have to worry about my daughter looking at me. But yes, yeah, I thought that was genius. That was so poetic. But overall, this was an excellent Superman movie. I thought that we would get at least a decent movie. I wasn't expecting much from it, to be honest with you, and I got much more. I got a whole lot more, and I'm excited for this universe going forward, as I stated in my initial review. And so, like I said, just to add on, this movie is still a B plus in my humble opinion. I think it's one of the best Superman movies, if not the best. I'm not gonna fight anybody on that if that's your opinion. Superman movies to be released. I super enjoyed it, and I will be going to see it for a third time before it's all said and done. Probably, well, I got to do it this week because next week, of course, is Fantastic Four. But I'm super happy, and round of applause to James Gunn for giving us a movie full of heart, full of hope, and a cinematic universe that we can be excited about. But once again, I would love to know, what were your thoughts of Superman? Did you enjoy Superman? Did you think it's up there with Richard Donner's 1978 Superman, or do you think it's more along the lines of Superman 4, A Quest for Peace? I would love to hear your thoughts about this version. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel. And like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this spoiler talk for James Gunn's Warner Brothers DC Studios new film, Superman. Want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.